It's a good question. I don't know the answer to the question. I would assume not. I think the market's closed, right?
Usually,
But I don't believe that all government agencies follow. I don't know the answer to the question. We could probably get one.
well, just the bigger question will be at some point I'll ask you just to provide updates now that this thing has been operating for a little bit over a week technically, what you're seeing on the ground.
Yep.
And what
Yeah, I got it.
Business is great. And the biggest tragedy of all this, I don't think chambers of commerce qualify.
I know.
Really?
For some things, right?
Maybe.
You're not for profit. Why would you not be a not for profit like all others?
We're a 501c6, not a C.
So it's the difference being a membership organization.
Effectively, yeah.
Yeah.
Jim Hennebrey, who did the processing for us, is still pushing it forward, but and perhaps and one of the questions I would have for you is, do we think that additional stimulus is going to be coming beyond the existing funding from the federal government?
You want me to take that question?
With complete clarity.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm all over it.
Yeah. Put your hand on the Bible.
How's my background? Is it okay? I'm sitting in my living room.
Yeah. It's not as stimulating as a bookshelf or something, but you're well lit.
Yeah, I'd be afraid of what someone might see on my bookshelf, so I think this is good. I'd have to check the titles.
Yeah. Yeah, so I had my kids 3 nights ago cut my hair.
Not bad. Good effort.
Yeah, if you look, yeah, it's pretty bad.
Turn around.
I've considered the same question and just decided that I would stick with Shaggy.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
At the moment, I thought it was a great idea, and the moment it happened,
As it's happening, it might all fall out in time, so it doesn't matter.
it's right. Stressful, just yeah.
I think we've accelerated the rate.
Yeah. All right. We've got a few people who are jumping on. And we'll start in just about 2 or 3 minutes, guys.
Dougan, the last one we did, I saw the Q&A window just right here. I don't see one. Is that because there isn't one, or because I've
I see the Q&A window, John.
Because I did a bunch.
Yeah, I saw that you did that, and I thought that was great.
I tried to keep up with them last time. I've got it now.
You got it? Okay.
Yeah.
Also,
I'll be less able to do that this time. I had a bunch of panelists last time, and so when someone else was answering a question, I was typing answers in the Q&A window. With it just being us, that'll be harder.
I can add them as panelists so that they can answer the questions, and he can.
Okay. John, Kate just conveyed the message that if you did have somebody that you wanted to ping from Pentucket Bank, Kate could add them to field the questions. Otherwise, we had over 100 people last time. I'm expecting a smaller, more specific audience, so maybe we can answer these questions live too.
Let's just try that. We're kind of specifically keeping people working with customers here today rather than being on these. So
great. Yep. Okay. Just give it another minute here. Joe Susi, good morning. Good morning, everybody else. Just responding to Joe's text. Yeah, text us, sure, or just write it down on a piece of paper. All right, it's 11 o'clock. I want to say good morning to everybody who has joined us. Thanks for being with us. My name's Dougan Sherwood. I'm the president of the Greater Haverhill Chamber, and I hope everybody is safe and healthy and staying at home to whatever extent you can. This is a follow-up conversation to a webinar that we had last week where we led with elected officials from our local, state, and federal governments, and then followed that with a conversation with local lenders and legal experts to talk to us sort of on the ground what all the different stimulus programs mean for those of you in the small business community. So this is part two of that, with the hope that now that we've been living with the stimulus program open for business for about a week or so, that we have, that those of you who have applied or are planning to apply have some specific questions. We're joined by John Dowst, who is the president of Pentucket Bank, who has been living along with many of his colleagues in the banking industry all over the United States to work furiously to understand and put into action the federal stimulus funding initiatives that have come through that were signed by the president in the past week or so. So John, thanks. First of all, thanks for making the time. I do know how busy you are. I do know that you and all the other banks in the community are working very hard to support our small businesses. So you don't get to say this very often, but thanks to you and your banker friends for all that you're doing to serve the community.
I have to say, Dougan, I'll speak for myself, but probably for a lot of bankers, we've never been this popular before. We're not quite sure how to react to that, but
yeah,
it is a new sensation.
Yeah. Well, it certainly has humanized the industry, which you're right. This is sort of a unique moment, but all kidding aside, I am incredibly grateful for the tireless work that the banking industry has done in general throughout the United States, but very much specifically for the work that our community banks are doing. This is a very difficult time for many small businesses. Many of you are on the phone or on the screen right now. It's a very frightening time. There are businesses that will not survive. And there are businesses that are going to survive because of some of the stimulus initiatives that our governments have put in place, and so it's all effectively being funneled through our local banks. So, really do appreciate you taking the time right now for joining us here. But to those of you as well, again, good morning. This webinar does not allow you to speak, so we're going to invite you to comment. However, there's a Q&A button towards the bottom of the screen that says Q&A. We're going to ask that you use that for any specific questions you have or comments you want to make. Or chat on Facebook, exactly, or chat on Facebook. My colleagues Hillary and Kate are in the office today, and they're fielding those questions too. So I have some questions I have for John, where but I'm more than happy to take questions and steer the direction of this conversation to some of the specific things that some of you have, because we do have a smaller audience today. But John, if I can, let me just ask you to provide just sort of a bird's eye summary of what type of stimulus packages are available to, for the most part, small businesses in Haverhill. I'm looking at some of the names of people here, and these are businesses that are generally, less than $500,000 in annual income. I'm seeing a mixture of for-profit and nonprofit. I'm seeing some folks that are 1099 contractors and others, and then there's a number of folks here that are small business owners. And so if you could probably just, if it's a fair question, just to ask you just to just describe sort of a bird's eye view of the primarily the federal stimulus programs that are taking place.
Sure. quick correction to start. Dougan, thanks for the promotion. I'm not the president at this point. I'm the chief credit officer. I think the president thing might happen later this summer, but anyway, just for record keeping.
Got it.
Thanks for the question. You know, the banks are involved right now really in two of the four things I'll outline that I think are available to small business owners. I think, you know, if we zoom out big picture, there really are four avenues of help going on right now for small business owners and small businesses. You know, the first is the, existing unemployment process for individuals is expanded now, and there's a little extra funding in it. So, the unemployment process is, has been our government's primary way of handling this sort of issue, and it wasn't enough here, but it's there, and it's been added to, so there's a little extra money in it. So that continues to be, for a lot of people, the first stop. In addition, then, I think all the banks, I know we are really active in it, have been very free with payment deferrals on existing debt. So whether you have a residential mortgage or commercial loans, car loans, whatever it is, we all have been, and I know for Pentucket Bank, and then for most, if not all of our peers, we've been really easy about granting payment deferrals. So nobody should be sweating that. If you've got existing small business, commercial, or residential debt, and you're having a hard time with it, all it takes is a phone call or an email to your bank and your banker. That thing happens in a few days. What we've generally been doing is giving 3 months, with a second 3 months pretty easy to get. After that, it does get harder. We have to start changing the accounting treatment after 6 months. But the first 6 months are pretty darn easy. And nobody should be sweating that and sitting on debt and trying to make those payments when it's difficult. The way that generally works is the interest still accrues, but the extra payments are kind of tacked onto the end. So whatever your maturity date is stays in place. If it was supposed to fully amortize the loan, there'll be a balance. And at that point, the bank and you will have to work it out. But that's pretty easy, and it's kind of the second line of defense. Then there's the two programs that have gotten a whole lot of press. The economic injury disaster loan is the lending direct from the government through the Small Business Administration, and what everyone gets excited about is that the first piece of that tends to be a $10,000 grant, which is entirely forgivable.
It's
and then there's lending
EIDL, sort of the
EIDL. We've been calling it EIDL. So it's a little opaque as to how it works. The SBA manages the program. It's not managed by the banks, so they underwrite them. They administer the grants. Some of those have started to hit the $10,000 grants. I know of a couple of businesses that have actually received the checks. Others have received notification that they're approved for the checks. And then there's an additional amount of lending that can come through that program. So that's out there. It tends to be for broader economic injury. So if your revenues have just gotten crushed and you need help, they've got long-term lending at low fixed rates that can with payments deferred, that can step in for a lot of that.
So John, just to pause on that one just for a second here, just to summarize, so there's particularly attractive bait on the EIDL program, which is a $10,000 loan that most likely will be forgiven. Is that, am I saying that right?
Yeah, I would actually not even call it a $10,000 loan that'll be forgiven. They're fronting the loan program with a $10,000 grant. It's not even a loan. It's just here. While we process your application, live on this is is kind of the way it happens. So
should everybody effectively be applying for that? Is there a reason why you wouldn't want to apply for it?
Well, let me answer that in the context then of the fourth item, which is the Payment Protection Program loan that is being facilitated for the government and the SBA by the banks. So the fourth element that folks can get to is this Payment Protection Program loan, which allows you to borrow for essentially 2.5 months of your payroll. And then if to the extent you maintain that payroll for 2 months after the loan is originated, that loan is forgiven. And so it's much bigger than the $10,000 grant through the EIDL. It doesn't take any longer, and it's a little more clear in terms of how it works. A little more clear anyway. It's not perfectly clear. And to the extent that we banks process one of these PPP loans and a borrower has already done one of the EIDL loans, we'll just, the amount of the PPP loan is reduced by the grant. So you can do both, but you can't double dip both.
Got it.
So they kind of work together. Now there's been some noise that the government may eliminate that piece. I don't know if that's happened yet, meaning the offset. As of last night, which was the last point I'd updated on that, EIDL grant recipients of the $10,000 grant, we would reduce the PPP loan eligibility by that 10 grand.
Okay.
I don't know if that's changed yet or not.
Okay.
This stuff it changes twice a day, essentially. You get a morning email from the SBA and an evening email. And
we'll do another webinar at 3.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
No, we're not. There's no we in that. You can do one.
I had a question related to the EIDL one. I have been encouraged, and I have been encouraging businesses, particularly with the PPP program, to get their application into their local lender soon, because this is a finite amount of money that's been allocated by Congress, and then when it runs out, it runs out. So am I correct when I say that PPP is a time-sensitive submission for small businesses, and and as far as I've understood, EIDL is not. That's something where you have a longer time frame. Can you comment on that?
So I'm more informed on the PPP. You're absolutely right. Congress allocated $349 billion to the PPP program. And as it's set up now, when that's gone, the program's over. I think there'd be an intense amount of political pressure for Congress and the president to re-up that. And I do believe they've all said they would. There's actually a battle going on about kind of replenishing it and whether it comes with a lot of other strings attached or not. So I think the answer will be, if it runs out, it'll get replenished.
Okay.
But I still think sooner is better than later. Banks are getting flooded with them, and there's a point where, so we actually had a meeting last night. What do? We have to do them, and we want to. This is where we are actually helpful to our communities. But
meaning you're actually being overrun by the number of small businesses.
Yeah, there's a point where, we're a small bank in Massachusetts. We got good at this pretty fast. Great. But then we can't solely support the small business community of Massachusetts ourselves. At some point we have to cry uncle. We're not going to do that unless or until we really have to.
Okay.
We'll keep going on it. But sooner would be better than later. Some banks are now actually expanding. They came into the program saying they're going to be very limited. I know Bank of America originally said only existing borrowing customers could do it. They've expanded it now to be borrowing and deposit customers. So banks are kind of expanding participation in the program as it becomes clearer, which is good. The more of us there are to do this, the more easily it'll be available to small business owners.
Okay. And I'm seeing a couple of questions regarding specific to contractors and some nuances. I'll get to those in just a second. But so the EIDL, the timing of that is less clear to you?
I believe, and I may have this wrong, I believe they said it was going to be in place through June 30. Again, I've spent most of my time on where we have to execute, which is the payment protection or payroll protection program,
right?
Which also is a June 30 or when the funds run out.
Or when the funds run out, right? Okay. But you're reading between the lines, and there's a sense that if, depending on how this shakes out, it's possible that Congress could add more to the fund. Yep. To keep it going. But suffice to say that contacting your local bank where you do your business is the way to go. Small businesses cannot submit this to the government directly. They have to go through their lender.
Correct. Yep. So the SBA has limited resources. It's one administration with X number of employees, and they could only do so much. So essentially, the big part of this program, they outsourced us, which is fine. That's I think that was kind of brilliant. And you know, we're struggling with it too, but at least there's more of us than them. And so they've deputized us to a large degree to execute the program, and that's what we're doing.
Let me, John, let me jump into a couple of specific questions that are coming through. And again, I understand that a lot of these nuances are probably not even clear to you, but let's take a shot at them. Can you collect unemployment and IDL? Yeah.
I'm going to guess yes, but it's a guess, and I don't like guessing because I'm a banker. So I think that the programs are independent, but I think you're going to have to work through the EIDL paperwork and ask the question. I think the government site on that is pretty specific. So basically, you go to sba.gov, and early on in some of those pages, there's the EIDL program information and application. You do it right online there, and I believe their Q&A is pretty detailed. So for the EIDL specifics, I would refer people to that right to the sba.gov site. We've talked to a couple of borrowers that have done it, and they said it was pretty easy to get through.
Okay. Next question, John. If someone is a 1099 employee, I guess they'd be a contractor, but weren't last year, could they apply with no income to show from last year?
So the independent contractor part of the payment or payroll protection program, the eligibility for independent contractors starts tomorrow. So the first week was reserved for small business, kind of owners and employers. After the first week, it is opened up now to independent contractors. I haven't seen specific regulations or rules that are for independent contractors that are different than those for small business owners. So if they don't issue separate rules, then what I'm about to state will hold true. If they do issue separate rules, then it could get changed. The rules for that we're operating under to this point for employers under this are, we use 2019 as the baseline for eligibility. But if 2019 is not available, or if a business is newer, then they can use the 2020 information. It's a shorter baseline. And so I don't have the dates specifically, I believe it's January 1st through February 15th. Again, that's available on, I think, all of our websites. So if someone had to be in business by 2000, in 2020 to qualify, and I think you can use that shorter time frame to qualify if that's all you've got.
Okay.
Sorry, kind of a long and winding answer.
Yeah, and well, I know it's unclear and complicated. So again, thank you for taking a shot at all these. Another question here is, how does the work share program work? Is it part of the PPP program?
I am not familiar at all with work share.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, let's move on then. I'm not familiar with it either. It was a question, and whomever actually reached out with that question, if you have, if you can clarify, then I'll come back to it.
Yep.
Let me move to the next question here. There's some confusion about exactly who is eligible for the IDL, non-employee statutory Schedule C with benefits. Forgive me, I'm not familiar with that. If you, hopefully you might be. Do these qualify? If income is down because of this, does it apply to these?
I'm going to read between the lines a little bit. Now, first off, I'll say for EIDL, again, the banks aren't administering that. The SBA is, and I think their site's pretty good with some questions. I believe what the person asking the question is talking about with non-employee statutory Schedule Cs is essentially a sole proprietorship. We have one individual employee reporting their income on Schedule C. Those do qualify for PPP. I don't know whether or not those would qualify for the EIDL program.
Okay.
But we can lend on Schedule C earnings in the PPP program. I would guess that they're the same with EIDL, but I don't know, and I'd have to kick people to the SBA site for that.
Got it. Here's another specific question, John. This person's a contractor, but they're paid via a W-2. Their contract is ending at the end of May. If they can't find any other employment, are they eligible to apply for any benefits?
So I believe, I'll answer for the PPP first. you should be eligible for payment protection program as a contractor starting tomorrow. So the independent contractor part of the program kicks off tomorrow. And again, if the rules are the same as they have been for the for other employers, then it'll take a look back at your average wages under the program, and you'll be eligible for 2.5 times that, your monthly wages going forward. And then you get that forgiven if you maintain those through the 8 weeks of the program. So I am going to assume those rules stay the same. We haven't seen anything different, and it's the day before the program opens, so you should be eligible to do that. The question you may have is, if your contracting ending at the end of May, then your payroll is going to drop to 0. What does that do for your forgiveness? It's a good question, and they haven't published those rules yet. So we'll all be waiting for the forgiveness language. I would suggest in that situation you hold a little bit, since you're still employed. I would hold and wait for them to publish the forgiveness rules for contractors before you apply. Because once you apply and a bank approves you, we've got to fund it. One of the rules is we've got to fund within 10 days of approval. And if all of a sudden then your employment terminates and that means your loan isn't forgiven, you're kind of stuck with it, right? You'd want to repay it out of the funds rather than end up having to get stuck with payments for the next 2 years. So I would hold a bit until you see those rules.
And I'll just call out Pam Price from our friend Pam Price at City Hall at the Economic Development Office, said that she sat in on a webcast on Tuesday hosted by the SBA, and they said that the deadline for EIDL is 12/16/20, and I have heard December as well.
That's great. Good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be contradicted on that, because that's the type of thing. Let's say we all get back to normal in a month. The economic damage is going to take a lot longer than that month to recover. So it's great to see that program goes throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah. Is there, if I could ask you just to speak from a macro point of view for a second, John, in terms of what the overall perspective is from the banking industry about the financial impact. Let's say that this does run through May. What type of forecasting is there being sort of discussed? And I understand that we are in unprecedented waters, but I also have found it very interesting when I've been able to read articles that are coming from the industry, particularly the banking and finance industry, and getting a sense for how they're reacting to this and what they're anticipating, coming in May, June, July, and so forth.
So I'm an economist by education, a banker by career for 30 years or so. This hasn't happened before. So we're all making it up. And if anyone answers a question like that with any degree of surety, I'd be surprised.
Right.
I'll just tell you how we're applying it, and I assume a lot of banks are doing the same thing. We stress test ourselves pretty frequently. We're small enough the government doesn't force us to do a stress test, but we think it's good business to do that. And the way you do a stress test is you look back and say, all right, what are the worst things that have happened to you over history? Apply them to your current balance sheet and income statement and see how they treat you. So we've done that. And so what I've asked our team to do is, all right, double the worst thing that's happened in history and ask that question against our P&L and balance sheet. Mm-hmm. I assume that a lot of other bankers and economists are saying the same thing. I don't know that it's that. If it is something where we can all get back to, we can pull the restrictions off of our social interactions and off of our economy, in a month or two, I think we bounce back reasonably quickly. If it goes on a long time, then some of the damage gets to be more permanent. And I think that's kind of the opinion that's forming through a lot of economists and business professionals. So hope is not a strategy. I've said that a lot of times, but in this case, I think we have to hope that that we start to pull some of the restrictions off in the next month or two. And I do feel fairly good about our bounce back capability if it's short term like that.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone can be more specific than that.
A couple questions that I think that have been addressed in one form or another, but again, I think just to make sure that we are really nailing the basics of what people should be, how people should be thinking about this. I'm going to ask this question again, John, just to ask you to speak to it. Do people who receive 1099s qualify for EIDL or PPP, or do they just qualify for unemployment?
So we are pretty confident that 1099 employees will be able to apply under the PPP starting tomorrow, so independent contractors. That is how the program has been defined to this point to us, that independent contractors, it's interesting, the government has not said 1099 employees, they've just used the term independent contractors, that the program would be opened up to them starting tomorrow. Because we haven't been in that, we haven't really looked underneath the covers of what that means and how we apply it. But starting tomorrow, we'll have to, and hopefully we've got some more guidance from the government at that point. The SBA has been really good. You know, they got the grenade thrown in their foxhole from Congress about getting $349 billion distributed in short order. They've been playing catch up. They've done a pretty good job of it, but you know, they play catch up on today's problem and not tomorrow's problem. So they gave us underwriting guidelines for small businesses in general as soon as they had to. Tomorrow it opens up to independent contractors. We're pretty confident we'll get underwriting guidelines there. We're just starting to get loan documentation guidelines. So we actually sent our first documentation sets out last night and this morning. So we're beginning to document and fund some of these. Mm-hmm. Then the forgiveness language will come. You know, 8 weeks out, we're going to all wonder, you know, exactly how are we calculating the forgiveness, and we'd like to have some of that formulated before the 8 weeks start. So they're issuing these guidelines as they go. They're doing a pretty good job keeping up, and then we're applying those as quickly as we can. That's a long-winded way of saying I don't have all the answers to the independent contractor questions because it starts tomorrow, and we don't have all the rules yet.
Got it.
I'm assuming they're going to be similar to the ones we're operating under now.
Yep. And I know that this relates to a lot of businesses in the community and individuals in the community. And so the chamber is going to stay on top of it too.
Hey, actually, Dougan, on that point, can I just,
please.
Let me jump in. There are a lot of third-party interpreters of the government programs that are sending out emails about it's this, it's that, it's the other thing, here's how to do it. And not the chamber, but many of them have been straight up wrong. So what I would encourage people to be doing is going to the SBA.gov website and getting the program guidelines direct from the source. Mm-hmm. They're pretty good, actually. And what's happened with some of the third-party stuff, they go to the website, they interpret it. You know, the AICPA has done it. And then a bunch of accountants take the AICPA guidance, they reinterpret it. A bunch of other parties reinterpret that, and it's a game of telephone. And by the time you're reading it, it's wrong. Mm-hmm. So I'd encourage people to be going straight to the source for the rules and requirements on all of these programs. It changes every day or two. So even to the extent that, say, Dougan, you put rules out, and someone reads them 3 days from now, they're going to be out of date.
Right.
And so everything we publish gets out of date as soon as the SBA it issues additional guidance. So the place to stay on top of it is straight at SBA.gov.
So SBA.gov, we'll say it again, SBA.gov. That's not only where you get the most current information directly from the source, which is where Pentucket Bank and others are probably referring to on an hourly basis. That's also where the forms that you need to actually process the paperwork. Is that correct? So EIDL and PPP forms that people will actually click a button and go to the PDF and either print it or fill it out online. That all lives at this SBA.gov website. Is that correct?
It does, yep. And so what we've done, and I think some of the other banks are doing too, we pull them from the SBA.gov and we hang them on our site and we keep them current. There are some forms and processes that each bank has under the PPP program that are in addition to the SBA forms. So they basically said, here's the application, here banks are the things you need to do, in order to validate the application and underwrite the loan. So banks have slightly different processes for that. So we hang all that on our site in terms of getting the PPP done. For the EIDL loan, it's all direct to the SBA.
Okay.
I wouldn't want anyone to take any information on the EIDL loan from any place but SBA.
Got it. And one thing that was made clear too with the conversation we had last week that you were part of, John, as was Jim Hennebree from Haverhill Bank, is that, and you referred to it earlier, is that you have a small team. They're working as hard as they possibly can, and they're servicing these contracts or these submissions. But it requires the business owner or the individual to really get their paperwork in order. And so I think is it safe to say that we should encourage everybody who is going to be submitting through their bank to make sure that they're filling out the paperwork properly. So when you get it, there's not a lot of back and forth.
So I didn't pay Dougan to say that, but I would have if he'd asked. Yes, I'm going to try to give the same-ish quote that I did last week or early in the week. I've lost track of the days.
Right.
We have built queues for all of the applications, and so you make and it started out as paper. We've gotten it fairly digital now. There's applications that we received and we haven't processed yet. Right, we're getting to it. It's actually fairly small. We've kind of caught up. Then we've gotten to it, and some of them are incomplete. Some of them, we have everything we need, we process them. It doesn't take very long. It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
We generally are approving them. Every now and then you send it back for some more information, but we're approving them. And then it goes into approved, and we enter it to the SBA site to get a loan number and the funds reserved from the SBA. And then it enters a documentation queue, and then it enters once the documents are signed, it enters a funding queue and people get their money. So we're starting to get some deals to the end of that process now. Unfortunately, the biggest queue in the whole process is up front, incomplete, which means either someone filled something out wrong, or they didn't follow the instructions, or they left out some of the information. It's the biggest queue. Don't be in that queue, small business owners. Be in any one of the other queues. So slow down at the front of the process, read the information that we're asking for, do your homework, fill it out. It's not that hard. If you're stuck, ask your accountant, but you really don't need them. You fill out the forms, make sure, use the checklist. We've developed a little checklist right on our site. Use it. If you haven't checked all the boxes, and you submit it, you're gonna sit in the incomplete pile. It's the biggest pile, and it's the last one we're getting to. Yeah. So you got to help yourself in this. We can't hold your hand because there's too many of you and too few of us. We got hundreds of applicants and 7 lenders. So given that math, the small business applicants that can get their forms filled out are going to get better service than the ones that can't. There's only so much hand holding we can do. We'll do as much as we can, but it's limited. Yeah. So you're better off to be complete than incomplete.
I think it makes sense. And Joe Susi, I see your comment here. If there are many amazing business owners that actually aren't strong on the bookkeeping or the finance side of their business, and so there ain't no shame in not actually even knowing what you're designated as. I had to double check and say, what kind of a nonprofit is the Chamber of Commerce? And I actually went through the process as the president of a chamber. A nonprofit, filled out the PPP, submitted it to my lender, only to learn that we're actually not, we don't qualify because we're not the type of 501c3 that technically does. So I went through the process and learned it's actually quite simple. It's a 2-page, the PPP form is 2 pages. In fact, I'm gonna do my best here to share my screen just in case people haven't actually pulled it up yet. I'm going to actually share my screen here, John, just so you can see the form. So this is the PPP form, right? Yep,
that's the one. You got the right version too. You must have pulled it straight from SBA.gov.
Yeah, kudos to Kate Martin. She just did it. It's 30 seconds old. So you're simply going up here. You're checking which business you are. If you're not sure. It is something where you can, well, I guess my question, John, is, because you might have a more thorough answer, how can somebody find out what type of entity they actually are?
So you can check at the Secretary of State. You probably had to register when you started, and the Secretary of State's website is pretty easy to navigate. You just look yourself up, or you can ask your accountant or your attorney if you have one.
Okay.
We can do it for you, but again, that's one of those things that you get up in the incomplete queue, and we're going to get to it, but better if you can figure it out for yourself.
Right. So if you're a sole proprietor, or if you're an independent, if you're a 1099 contractor, we've been using 1099 to sort of is a synonym for an contractor. And I don't actually know enough about contractors to know. The only time I've ever been a contractor, I have been 1099. Independent contractor and eligible self-employed individual, are those, do you know the distinction between those two? I guess one would be a W-2 that's somehow incorporated versus one who would be truly an independent contractor, which I guess would be a 1099.
Yeah, I believe an independent contractor is getting paid by someone else and issued a 1099. A sole proprietor has generally an EIN and is kind of paying themselves, right? And maybe some staff directly.
Right.
So it really is the method of payment. And importantly for sole proprietors, your payroll counts and your net profit counts in terms of eligibility. So what you pay your people and what you pay yourself as draw or profit are both eligible under the average monthly payroll number here.
Okay. So the rest of the information on this form, really the only math that you need to do is right in this section right here. Through the payroll provider, for me at the chamber, we actually got our Rockingham Payroll Services does our payroll, and they have a spreadsheet that they actually were able to generate for us, and it was really quite easy. So for anybody who does have payroll or has a payroll provider, they should be able to get this information for you. If you don't have a payroll provider, chances are your business might be simple enough where you can actually you know this information directly. But really figuring out that average monthly payroll, which is effectively understanding what you're sort of averaging your monthly payroll of 2019 if you had a full year. And as you had said before, perhaps you can prorate it if you haven't been in business that long going into 2020. But that's effectively that's the number that you're requesting. From there, a lot of these questions are really asking about have you been in default? Have you received a loan before? Are you a felon? Are you a resident of the United States? Can you illegally? A lot of these questions, for most people, you should be able to run through in 2 seconds and click yes or no quite easily. And then you're effectively, the last page is just signing that this is all legitimate. Of course, we encourage everybody to read this thoroughly, but it shouldn't take more than just a few minutes. And really the only part I think that folks won't have information directly off the top of their head is just calculating the payroll number.
Yep, Dougan, good overview. And so you're right, the money part of the form is the money part of the form. It's that average monthly payroll times 2.5. So what I think most banks have done is said, all right, to back that up, give us a few things. And each bank has specified what information they want to back it up. We created a little Excel-based calculator where you take, as Dougan, you referenced, you've got your payroll provider to give you a summary. We've said, all right, take that information, put it in this simple little calculator, and it's going to calculate that average monthly payroll number for you. And that's the number you put in the application. So we've tried to make it as easy as possible. Every bank has a little bit different process or form for that, but we're all starting to kind of trend towards the middle on it.
Sorry, John, I was reading the chats. What he was, is that form, that sort of that formula, do you have that linked to your website too?
Absolutely, yep.
All right.
So what we've done is we've got this form on our website. We've got the little calculator, and we've got a checklist that says, here are the things you need to have done before you press submit to submit it to us. So we've tried to make it really, really as easy as possible.
Great. And I know other banks have a similar table of contents that has to be checked before they can submit. So,
and just to double down on a couple things while you still have this form up, I mean, it seems silly, but each of the boxes matter. And so, well, the money part of the thing is that section that that Dougan highlighted here. Don't leave things blank. You know, it's all we've got to do what the SBA has asked us to do. We can't finish and fund your loan until this is complete. So if you leave something blank, it's going in the incomplete file.
Yeah.
There's 7 of us and several hundred of you at our bank, and there's, you know, it's going to take us a few days to get back to it. So QC your work, make sure that you filled it out. If you have questions, either ask your banker or ask your accountant, whoever you're working with, or try to think it through on your own. You know, these are not rocket science questions.
Got it. Just doing a quick scan through here. So John, you had mentioned that the time frame for this is not entirely known in terms of once you actually submit this form or the idle form. You can't actually exactly say when the actual money would hit the bank account for a business owner. But what you're generally hearing is that they're moving. The process is starting to move, and I ask that in part because I think that the system was overrun the first night at midnight last Wednesday. It sort of was a failure to launch. It has now. Is it safe to say that it's now since launched? It's operating. Banks are able to. The wheels are cranking in the right way, and so
yeah.
you're generally confident that people will get money. Can't say when, but soon.
Yeah, that is true. We actually were in at midnight. The system didn't quite work. We gave up at about 2 a.m. We came back in and we did get our first deals approved Friday morning by 8:30. So those deals now, actually the first 2 deals we processed Friday morning, we sent documents this morning. And if they get them back to us, I don't know, before 3 or 4, we'll fund them today.
Yeah.
So what was that? So Friday, what's today? The days are running together. I think so. That's 4 or 5 business days. So,
yep.
You know, certainly within 2 weeks. But I think for folks that are up on the wheel and kind of getting this figured out, as we get better at it, and there was a big surge in applications right at the beginning. As we get through that, you know, we should be funding, you know, within a week of application. That would be that's our goal internally at Pentucket Bank.
Great. We've talked exclusively up to this point, John, about the SBA and the federal government's assistance. There has also been money created by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Can you speak to that from a lending point of view? And are there funds that small businesses should be looking to receive from the state?
I am not expert on those. Generally, the state, you know, through mass development and you know, they have a capital access program, has administered those directly. And sometimes we partner with those organizations where, you know, we'll do a loan and they'll do a mezzanine type or more of an equity type contribution in certain instances. We have not yet partnered with them on any of these programs because they're separate programs, right? The Fed's program is here, and I think so. We've had to get up on the federal program because we're the ones delivering it. We have not in the last week started to figure out exactly how we partner with the state programs. I know they're active. One of the businesses we're working with to try to get funded out of the PPP already received a state loan separately. So I guess what I'm not expert on it. I think I would ask everyone to go straight to the state sites on those, and they're working equally hard on trying to provide state support, the same as the feds.
Yeah, and thanks, John. Let me plug the haverhillchamber.com. We have a link that says COVID-19, and we've been working to make sure that that's very much current on links to the state agency, mass development, to the SBA. So we tried to be make sure that everything that we have on our website is relevant, accurate, and goes directly to the sources. So if people do have questions about opportunities to claim assistance from the state, what I'm hearing from you is it's not actually regulated that you go through your lender. You can probably do something directly from the state, which is good.
Yeah, the state programs tend to be direct. I agree. And I like the way you're setting that up, Dougan. Rather than disseminating the information, you're driving inquiries to the source. And that way, as they change their program rules and update the information, it'll always be accurate.
Correct. Right. Great, John. I don't see any other questions. I'm gonna look at my team here to say we good. We're good on Facebook. Okay. And if I can give you an extra 12 or 15 minutes of your day to keep keep processing these forms, that's time well spent. So I want to thank you very much, John, for doing this. And again, you're representing the banking community here, which is working tirelessly. And so if anybody has questions about any elements of this today, think of the chamber as a conduit. And so info@haverhillchamber.com. Haverhillchamber.com is our website. Please reach out to us there. Is there a question that just came through? Okay. Okay. And let me also just use this while we have a couple dozen people on the line here to talk about a fund that the chamber just kicked off yesterday. We're calling #HaverhillLocal. This is while the banks are working hard to process the significant investments that the governments are putting back into the communities, which really is, this is a pandemic, as we said, this is a moment in history, and it requires the $2 trillion that has been signed by the president to really provide relief. At the very same time, the chamber is a local organization that really realizes also that there is a role for everybody to play at every level. And so we created a fund yesterday for retail businesses, Main Street USA, the small mom and pop businesses. There's several of you on the line. It's the yoga studios, the fitness centers, the garden centers, the dry cleaner, the hair salons. We've raised almost $50,000, or between $50,000 and $60,000 at this point, for restaurants through a restaurant gift card program that we launched about 2 or 3 weeks ago. We're now running a program specifically to help all the other retail storefront businesses. They represent a huge part of our economy. They're responsible for employing many people. They're part of obviously the culture and the community here. You're either on the line or you know people who are part of this community. And so if you go to our website, there's a big ribbon right at the front of our haverhillchamber.com that'll take you to more information, not only about how to actually put money into the GoFundMe fund that we've created for this retail program, but also to see the list of participating local businesses, so you can directly click. And we've added a financial incentive as well. So if you buy any product or gift card or buy any service from any of the participating businesses, the chamber is going to put 25% take 25% right off the bill for up to $100. So you could buy a gift card to a hair salon or Riverside Cycle or Alley at Yoga Tree, and for $75, you'll get $100 worth of value. So anyway, just wanted to put that out there. But John, thanks again. Stay hydrated, stay safe, make sure you pull plenty of protein. Keep going, buddy.
All right. And hey, it's good to see the chamber digging in here. You know, everyone finds a gear in these types of circumstances, and you guys have found another one. So thanks for what you're doing.
Thank you. All right. We'll talk soon. Everybody be well. Have a great day.